Look, I know in my last video I said I was going to get back to talking about movies. Unfortunately, I just haven't found one that has really grabbed me, and in the times we live in, it sometimes feels too trivial to engage in my dumb little hobby. Given the current state of America, and as someone who is very visibly not white, it's just been kind of a bummer. I've taken to having my passport on my person at all times, or at least within reach. I don't know for sure if that will help me when the American Gestapo unlawfully stops me. I mean, probably not. In addition, I worry about my parents, and who I have noticed the last time I visited now have their naturalization papers framed and hanging visibly in the home. Some of my friends who are also naturalized citizens are doing similar things. It's just a really shitty time. I guess just keep up with everyone in your lives. Find people you can trust. Share information in a secure way. And I know I'm kind of speaking vaguely there, but it's not because I'm doing anything illegal, but what does that really even mean in this moment? And I'm not fishing for sympathy here. I just wanted to be honest. I'm certainly the most afraid I've ever been in terms of just living my day-to-day life, but for complete context, I can't say I'm necessarily in pain or have been personally harmed by the Trump administration's ethnic cleansing campaign, at least as of this recording. As dark as things get, it doesn't dissuade me from trying to take some time to entertain or distract myself, which is why I'm finally trying to sit down and make another video. I'm not one of those people who believes that joy is a form of resistance, because it really isn't. However, that doesn't mean to imply that joy is useless. I actually believe it's very important in terms of just being a person, but joy can also offer perspective and give clarity to the purpose of resistance. And I guess while I'm on the topic of resistance, guns. Whether this is a fact that can be verified or just a personal feeling I have based on nothing more than whatever weird algorithm I've been siloed into on YouTube and social media has put me in, it feels more and more like people on the left side of the divide are asking if they should arm themselves. As a general principle, I personally believe in self-defense, which for me does encompass owning a gun. However, I will reiterate something I said in a video I released around this time last year, and simply, I don't think you should do anything you're uncomfortable with. Everyone has their own path, their own strengths and weaknesses. Gun ownership is a large responsibility, not just in the moral sense of owning a dangerous tool, but also just in terms of practicality, from operation to maintenance and storage. Simply getting a gun might make you feel safe, but just feeling safe is not an actual solution without a strong commitment to learning how to use a gun properly and responsibly. You know yourselves better than I do. If that doesn't sound appealing to you, then don't get one. Don't force yourself into owning a deadly weapon to make yourself feel better, because owning one is already a liability for your own safety, so there's no reason to further endanger yourself if you feel like you're not going to take it seriously. It's not on you to become something you aren't. There is no one-size-fits-all approach in terms of this particular moment in American history. And trust me, there is a place for you. Your usefulness is not solely defined by your willingness to engage with violence. After all, these movements are not won through violence. Yes, violence sometimes happens in these moments of social upheaval. However, it's not the sole force that enacts and maintains change. And if I'm being real, we just can't win in a direct conflict. Any utility that violence has is extremely limited. Personally, I believe the best option in terms of resistance is just focusing on areas where there is slightly less asymmetry. Firstly, and perhaps most importantly, they don't even know you or your communities. There's only so much reading a map and satellite images can do to prepare an invading force. A hallmark of all U.S. armed invasions is the failure to truly understand the environment in both terms of physical geography, but also the local culture. You may not realize it because the internet has flattened a lot of American identity, but your communities are unique in a way that just can't be accounted for without having the shared collective familiarity that you have with your neighbors. From a purely objective standpoint, this is why U.S. invasions often fail so catastrophically. So remember, you will always have the home field advantage. Secondly, the law still exists. Well, kinda. Fascist regimes are not too dissimilar from other forms of governance in the sense that they still require a critical mass of public support to maintain its legitimacy. There's only so much that can be done under the threat of violence. I know it's a little bit more complex than that with factors like social conditioning and indoctrination, but I'm not a real expert on how societies are organized and maintained. But anyway, fascist regimes cannot appear to be lawless because a cornerstone of fascism is an obsessive focus on law and order. No matter how selective and unequal the law has been applied in the United States of America historically, ICE and the Department of Homeland Security in general have still managed to somehow fuck up the generous leeway that they've been given in terms of the social contract that they have with the average American. And at this particular point in time, the lawlessness and callous disregard for human life shown by ICE has not yet become acceptable to the majority of the American people. Which brings me to my third point, documentation. While it's actually very important to post and share ICE's crimes for the world to witness in real time on as many platforms as you're able, it's also very important to accept that justice may never come, and if it does, it won't be swift. With that being said, this means saving things for posterity. Start keeping records of what you can about ICE offline on secure, detachable media, or even creating hard copies through handwritten notes or printouts. And if you feel like something like writing information down plainly is unviable, there are very basic ciphers that you can learn to use that will resist any decoding without a known key, especially given the type of information that's being stored. For instance, names, license plates, those things can easily be stored with simple substitution codes that are basically impossible to decipher without a key. Because unlike an encoded message that has context clues like grammatical structure and rigid spelling, there's not really much to, I don't really want to get that much into this, but if you're looking for a new hobby, cryptography can be fun for some of you, for a very small subset of you. Just make sure to log anything in regards to incidents and any persons involved, including agents, victims, dates, etc. And given the continued merger of big tech into our government, it's not unlikely that social media may go to great lengths to censor or even purge this data to cover up these crimes. Just know that there will come a time when these records will be useful and in the public interest. It won't happen overnight. It may even take years. But in the meantime, collect intel like it's fucking Pokemon. Lastly, this isn't the time to suffer fools. There will be people both in your personal life and online who you will encounter who will abuse this moment, who will justify their inaction in a number of ways, and sometimes try to get you to refuse to see the world as it is, and to not act. For instance, some will use pedantry or nitpicking, such as saying, well, it's not actually fascism because it doesn't check every single box on this particular list. That's nonsense. Ideologies, be they religious or political movements, are composed of a constellation of elements. However, not every single indicator must be present in order to accurately identify a particular ideology. For instance, let's just take Christianity, because it's the majority religion in the United States. There are dozens, if not hundreds of varieties of Christianity within the United States alone, all that do not necessarily meet the other's definition of what being a Christian means, but are in fact identifiable as being Christian. What I'm saying is exactly what I said this time last year. Fascism is here. If people aren't seeing it, it's because they are unwilling or unable to. Not because they're being calm and clear-headed about our current situation. And to be charitable to those people who are unable to see the fascism in front of their faces, they aren't all in willful denial. American education and propaganda conditions an overwhelming majority of the population to ignore or even misidentify the hallmarks of authoritarianism, because doing so would result in expanding curiosities that can only lead to inevitable critiques of our system and, in particular, capitalism. This leaves a large portion of the American population unable to even identify when authoritarian tactics are being used to erode their own freedom. In other cases, you may find that some feel they're somehow immune from the boot of fascism, without the understanding that fear is a key pillar to establishing authoritarian legitimacy. Yes, there are appeals to nationalism, militarism, and this longing for an idyllic past that never truly existed. But these are window dressing, not actual beliefs nor deeply held principles, because authoritarian movements like fascism only have one true tenet, and that is power. In order to maintain this power, there has to be a scapegoat for fascism to even function. That is to say, authoritarian movements like fascism are this meat grinder, and as such, these ideologies require the constant sacrifice of human lives to fuel its engine. Fascism doesn't exist without enemies, and so a core function of fascism is the constant defining and redefining of exactly who that enemy is. Because of this, safety under fascist rule is always a lottery, and the proximity to power or complete deference to power does not guarantee personal safety, because one day your lot may be drawn to appease the bloodlust of the state. This means, whether or not they know it, the willfully blind stand to benefit from rejecting fascism too, because their fate is equally as uncertain as those who are in opposition to fascism. It's important that they know this, but it's not your job to save them. Time is short, and we no longer live in a world where unserious people should be entertained. I know that if you're watching this and you're a lefty, that sounds extremely painful, because what brought you to left-leaning politics was a deep sense of compassion and a care for all. But the time for hand-holding is just over. You don't have to be mean to these people, but you don't have to be nice either.